So thank you all for bearing with me. What I wanted to do real quickly was have everyone respond to this polls everywhere. I just wanted to know what you all think inclusive science classrooms should look like or sound like or feel like. What you can do is you can go on your computer to pollsev.com/Gina Tesso, or you can use your phone and you can just text Gina Tesso to 37607 and then your response. I'm gonna leave this up here for 10 more seconds and then I'm gonna log into Polls Everywhere so you can see it, but that was already on my computer. So I just wanna know, what do you think inclusive science classrooms should look like? Yeah, it's pollev, so POLLEV.com/Gina Tesso. Teso, and that's T as Tom, Teso. Oh yeah, yes. Thank you. Huh, well they usually lets you log in without. It's not working for anybody else either?
It's working for me.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Yeah. I'll just read them out loud as they come up if they do, and if not, we can just move on to the presentation. I was just trying to get some information from everyone. But it might be not working out correctly for some reason. I'll just move on from here just to save time. But I do want to, I have 11 people that have responded, it seems. Well, I will just move on. I apologize. If by the end it starts showing up, I will show you. So my name is Gina Tesoriero, and I'm a second-year graduate student at the University of Washington in the Learning Sciences and Human Development program. I'm learning to study learning. I was a former special education teacher in New York City for 10 years before moving to Seattle. In Seattle, I work at the Institute for Science and Math Education in the College of Ed, and I work on a research project called Access, where I work with the Council for State Science Supervisors, and we collaboratively design professional development resources for teachers to create equitable formative assessments that bring in student cultural interests and identity. I also am an editor and a reviewer, an author of the STEM Teaching Tools resources. If you haven't heard about them, I definitely recommend trying them out. And if you ever want to collaborate on a practice brief, there are 2-page resources for STEM educators and administrators and researchers. I'm happy to collaborate with you. The image I have up here is of my poster that is downstairs in the poster room right now. I can explain the picture in more detail later if requested. I wanted to explore how educators design, enact, and evaluate these maker-inspired learning activities in inclusive classrooms. And making is defined as this idea of creation versus consumption. So teaching students how to be inventors and designers instead of just taking in information. It's also about remixing and making things your own. It's about designing things digitally or physically. It's the do it yourself or do it with others kind of mentality that's really moving through our society right now, and it's really about sharing your products and your process so others can iterate on it and improve. The maker movement kind of started in 2006 with the Bay Area Maker Fair. Has anybody been to a Maker Fair before? Great. Then they moved to New York in 2010 with the World Maker Faire, and there was even a Maker Faire at the White House in 2014, and Barack Obama was really supportive of the Maker movement. Now there are Maker Fairs all over the world in different countries, and it's really fun to travel around and explore them. But the reason why this is significant is because I was a teacher in New York City at the time, and right in the middle of this movement is when the next generation science standards were developed. As we heard from the previous presentation, these standards really focused on the doing of science in addition to knowing the science content. And what was significant about that was it also was about problem solving. It was the first time in science education we focused on engineering practices in addition to science practices. And I thought that this was a perfect opportunity to bring together the ideals of making and engineering because they're both very process-focused, they're both iterative, they're both open-ended and driven by student interest, and they're both collaborative processes. And so this is a very new idea, but I'm conceptualizing this continuum I'm calling Make-gineering for the moment, where making is more, about creative expression, but it's on a continuum with engineering where the creative expression can also be used to solve problems. And I think that this provides a good opportunity and a flexible environment to really make the classroom driven by your students' interests. As a teacher myself, I brought making into my classroom and realized that it was about learning with and from my students. From this experience, I learned things about my students that I never knew before, and it really helped in the other subjects that I taught. So maker-inspired activities really helped me create this learner-centered environment that didn't have these academic gatekeepers that are typically in classrooms. I had the lucky opportunity to travel around New York City and other states to present this idea that these maker pedagogies reduce barriers for students that are in special education classrooms. And I was able to share that even with, on the right, you see a picture of a student in the middle of a wooden structure with adults around, and that's one of my former students actually teaching adults how to do making. That group was actually problematic, and the child had to step in to support them, as many adult groups could probably be. However, I failed to realize that it wasn't just making that created these environments in classrooms. It was really that these special education ecosystems supported that. Now that I'm learning to be a researcher, I see a lot of research out there that talks about how we can improve these special education classrooms, but it doesn't always look at the beauty of these settings and the layers of support that are provided and just the interesting perspectives that the students and adults in these environments have. And I think that it provides a really interesting platform to look at the best case scenario of learner-centered spaces. And so that's what I'm hoping to do through this work, but it is emerging, as I am going to show. So instead of just within this bigger question of how do educators design, enact, and evaluate this type of learning, I really also wanted to focus heavily on how do these ecosystems within special education and inclusive settings support making, in addition to how can making develop inclusive classrooms. So the theoretical framing that I'm bringing to this at the moment is looking at these special education ecosystems within this pedagogical design cycle, which I adapted from Susan Locks-Horsley's work on professional development. And I'm also at the same time looking at how these making activities can create these inclusive learning environments, which I'm drawing from Susan Baglieri and Ben Shapiro's 2017 book. And these pieces are creating flexible pathways in the classroom, encouraging student agency, uncovering and disrupting ableism, cultivating a community of learners, and enhancing interpretive power. Interpretive power here is the ability to identify the different gifts that students bring into the classroom and help the students identify those too. that's what I felt making really helped me do as a teacher. So my whole activity or my design was really started with a workshop with some educators. And then there were some design sessions on how to modify, adapt, redesign, remix, if you will, that activity for the classroom. And then the classroom enactment. And then after the classroom enactment, I did some interviews. During the workshop, we had the science teachers and behavior technicians, which are, from my understanding, classroom paraprofessionals that focus on behavior. And then during the design sessions, one was between the science teacher and the behavior technicians, and a second one was between the science teacher and 2 students. In the enactment, there were also instructional assistants in addition to the 3 other groups that I added. And in the interviews, I focused on the adults in the room. In this presentation, I'm just going to focus on interviews. During the classroom enactment, we looked at loads and switches, and students created circuits to design an invention that solved a problem. They were given options of problems to solve, and they could choose the same problem and have different solutions, or they were provided opportunities to pick a problem that was worth solving to them, that was important to them. So students could have picked the same problem, as I mentioned, with different solutions, or had similar solutions that were meant to solve different problems. So students were able to enter into this task and take it in the direction that they were interested in. During this reflection activity, which is where I interviewed the educators, I talked to the science teacher for 90 minutes, the behavior assistants for 30 minutes each, and the instructional assistants, there were 3. I'm going to focus a little bit today on the instructional assistants interviews. So this one instructional assistant, mind you, these instructional assistants were not a part of the workshop. They had no knowledge of this activity, the goals of this activity, or how to use the tools, which was one of my findings that I'll talk about later. But even without this knowledge, there was still great information from the interviews that these instructional assistants shared. So one instructional assistant says, seeing other kids experiment in creative ways and then hook up timers and other kinds of stuff, I think that was really helpful for her because she was seeing that you don't have to just use like what's on the table. She was looking around and watching kids, you know, looking behind her when to see what kids were doing. Another instructional assistant mentioned when he tried things, either it would or would not do what he wanted, and he was receiving this like immediate visual almost feedback about the choice he was making. Either the LED worked or the circuit did not, and it didn't light up, it didn't buzz, things didn't happen. And she connected this, the instructional assistant, to him feeling like included in this classroom because he was able to engage in an activity that his classmates were engaging in without the barriers of reading levels and other academic barriers, like I mentioned. And finally, this is the one instructional assistant that actually did not have any prior experience with circuits. And so he hadn't ever done anything like this before. And he did notice that it was enough that he was able to persevere through frustration, which was one of the science teacher's goals. But when he was asked what the student learned or gained from this experience, it was very hard for him to identify anything that the student got out of it other than content knowledge. So although he did identify the goal of this activity, which was iterations and perseverance, he struggled when he was still relying on traditional metrics of assessment about content knowledge when he was asked. And so when I looked through all the interviews and from all the different educators, I wanted to look at how did these educators bring these practices to the classroom? What did the educators experience during the activity? And like what value did they share? Most of the excerpts I showed you were about the later 2 findings, but I'm just gonna go over them all now for practice, sharing them. So basically, I found that the educators were makers themselves. They had to go through this iterative design process that they were trying to implement in their classroom to do this. And through that, they were able to become very familiar with the tools and the goals and the flow. However, the instructional assistants weren't a part of that process. And so there was some obstacles for them to support this work. And during the enactment, this making really made thinking visible for the student themselves who got that immediate feedback, or for the instructional assistant to provide feedback to the student based on the choices they were making, or also, as the first quote I shared, from other students too. It's, your answer is not on a flat piece of paper. It's physical. And instead of it being like a copying, don't look around, it was actually promoted to look around the room and see. And finally, that to create these inclusive learning environments, there needs to be this shared vision and reflective practices. And when we leave a whole entire important component of the special education ecosystem out of the planning process, like we did with the instructional assistants, we're not providing them the opportunity to really support. We're not getting their feedback, and they're not able to support the students that they work with. So my next steps, this is a part of a design-based research study. This is a smaller qualitative section of it, but this is my second iteration, and I plan to do it every year that I'm in grad school. So next time when I do it, my focus is really going to expand these design communities and make sure that we're including at least instructional assistants, if not also students in a more intentional way. And I need to do a better job at centering the importance of disrupting ableism and encouraging interpretive power next time as I do the workshop, and really focus and center those two pieces of inclusive environments, because they were they did not emerge as much as from the findings. And I need to invite a participatory analysis. I analyzed this information all by myself without without the folks that were a part of the design. And while I know teachers are busy, I would like to at least offer the opportunity for them to engage in it with me in the future. I think that would be really good. And so I'm going to show you my references. And do I have time for one question? Okay, no time for questions, but I'll be around later. Thank you, guys.